Hello everyone, nice to see you all again. Wonderful to see everybody coming in. We'll just wait for another 5 to 7 minutes to let some more people join. I think everyone's joining gradually. Good evening, Mrs. Sandhya Shukla. Nice to see you. I think Gowri
Good evening, madam. Good evening, madam.
Ambika Satish from Maharishi Vidyalaya Mandir, Bilaspur. Wow, welcome. Good evening to you. D.V. Vasudeva Rao. Namaste, namaste. Welcome. Nice to see you all. And I hope we are without a technical glitch in this session. Poonam Patnaik. Hi, good evening. Welcome, welcome.
Good evening, ma'am.
Hi, good evening. Yogesh Payasi from MM School, Raipur. Wonderful to have you here. Devjani Das. Good evening, Devjani. I think you were with us last time as well. Anurag, good evening. Nice to see you. Hello, Arundhati. Arundhati, ma'am, good evening. Nice to see you here. Amit Kumar. Hello, good evening. Nice to see you. Manisha Mukherjee, Career Point World School, Bilaspur. Wonderful to see you. We have a lot of teachers from Bilaspur, Raipur. So, a warm welcome to all of you from Poonam Patnaik is also from Raipur.
Good evening, ma'am.
Padi. Namaste, namaste, Mr. Padi. Soumya. Oh, how sweet. Thank you, Soumya. Thank you so much. That's really sweet of you. Hi, Veena Vedi from Raipur. Welcome. Soumya, oh, that's wonderful. I'm sure Ma'am Ishwaran will be so happy to see you. That's really wonderful. Sudipta Mishra, educator from Bhubaneswar, Odisha. Warm welcome. Nice to see you. Nidhi, good evening. Nidhi Naik.
Good evening, ma'am.
Hi, good evening. Vikash Samal, Dharmashila Mahila Degree Mahavidyalaya, Jajpur. Namaskar. Vikash Babu, welcome. Nice to see you. Jyotsna Behra, good evening. Welcome. Pushpanjali Sahu, Lata Nair. A warm welcome to all of you. Jyotsna Behra from Nagpur. Wow, that's nice to see you here, Jyotsna. Stella Johnson, a warm welcome to you. Nice to see you. Manik Das, Sahiba, Soni, good evening. Welcome. Sahiba is from DPS Balko, Korba. That's really nice. Nice to see you. Surat Sahu, Namaskar. Manik Das from Raipur. It's really nice to see so many people from Raipur, Nagpur. Dr. Subhashri Das from BJMS. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
Sunita ma'am, that was Sunita ma'am. Ma'am, thank you very much, Sunita ma'am, for your message.
Good evening, everybody. This is Padma.
Good evening.
Hi, Padmalaya. Good evening. Padmalaya
Nice to see everybody.
from DPS Kalinga.
Yes, from DPS Kalinga.
Yes, Padmalaya. Warm welcome to you.
Thank you so much. I have Rashmit with me also.
Oh, welcome to her as well. Nice to see you all. Rashmit, yes. Snigdha Ghosh from Western Odisha Residential Public School, Khariyar. Good evening. Ambika from DPS Newtown. Wonderful. Kolkata. So we have someone from Kolkata as well. Ila Rani Das. Good evening, DPS Balko. So I think we will start in the next 2 minutes. I think we can now unmute Gowri ma'am if she's online.
Hello.
Gowri ma'am,
Yes, good evening to
very
all
good
of you.
evening ma'am. So we will start now.
Yes, but I wanted, there's some special people there. I think Sonali Sen, Revati Venkatesh, and Samya Kidwai. So a very special
Wonderful.
hello to all of them.
A very, very warm welcome to all of us.
Sonali is from DPS New Town, Kolkata.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, yes, I was just wishing her. So a very warm welcome to all of you. I think it's 10 past 4, so we should start now.
You're the boss.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, you're the boss, always the boss, unquestioned. So namaskar and a very good afternoon. Welcome to everyone who has joined us today for this very special session with Padma Shri Gowri Ishwaran. We first apologize profusely for the abrupt end to the last session due to a technical glitch which left us quite lost and unable to retrieve connectivity. As I told Ma'am Ishwaran, I think all of us definitely need to go through a spot of blended learning so that we are adept at handling such challenges thrown up by technology and the new normal. I will once again take this opportunity to record deep appreciation for all stakeholders, parents, teachers, children, school administration and management for having risen so gracefully to meet the challenges thrown up by the pandemic. Know how little time we had to make the switch over from real classrooms to online classes and the kind of adjustments that were required to be made overnight. 6 months later, we can all look back with a sense of satisfaction that with resilience and collaboration, we made possible what was seemingly impossible. All stakeholders in the learning teaching system are frontline COVID warriors. And without doubt, they're worthy of our deepest respect. Thank you, teachers and parents, for having been so exemplary. After 34 years, India has a new education policy, compelling and ambitious. The new education policy aims at doing away with the redundancy of the prevailing system in its objective towards a more contemporary and skill-oriented system of education in India. In this session, we will be discussing the possibilities and probabilities of the NEP, the concerns and the execution. To discuss the NEP and to unravel its agenda, we have with us one of the iconic educationists of our time, Padma Shri Gowri Ishwaran. She calls herself a teacher by heart, which is exactly what children need, the heart of a teacher. Recipient of the Padma Shri Award in 2004, Ma'am Ishwaran believes in the power of education to create change. Her innovative values-based approach to learning has catalyzed a paradigm shift in the Indian educational sphere. She was the founding principal of Sanskriti School in Delhi, which is counted among the leading schools in the country and is now CEO of the Global Education and Leadership Foundation. She is one of the senior administrators of the Shiv Nada Foundation and is a member of the governing council of the Vedika Scholars Program for Women. Wisdom Tree Global School, it's a great honor and utmost privilege to have Padma Shri Gowri Ishwaran on the advisory board, guiding us at every step to realize our vision of setting up a truly global school in the state of Orissa. A very warm welcome to you, Gowri ma'am. We are immensely grateful to you for giving us your time, and we seek your blessings, and we are fortunate to be enriched by your expertise.
Thank you. But I just want to make one thing. I'm actually the vice chairman of the Global Education Foundation, and I'm an advisor with the Shiv Nadar Foundation. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Corrected, ma'am. Okay, we stand corrected. We stand corrected. I would like to inform all participants to please type in your questions for Ma'am Ishwaran in the chat box, which will be taken up after the discussion. We are focusing on the national education policy today. On the new education policy today, I would like to start with something very basic but very important. Gowri ma'am, what makes a good teacher?
See, the role of a teacher has undergone a complete, almost 360-degree change, especially nowadays. But there are some things that are timeless. So a good teacher has to first and foremost love kids. you don't love children, then you can never actually be a good teacher in any zamana, if you want to put it that way. So you have to be warm, accessible, enthusiastic, caring, engaging, motivating. These are qualities that our gurus and teachers have had at all times, and they continue. There's one big change now. So far, in spite of all the other qualities, what we have been doing is we have been focusing on content, on facts, on theories, all leading to grades. But that has now undergone a change, and the teachers will now have to update themselves. Otherwise, what will happen? We'll all become obsolete, because information is available everywhere now, and most children have it at the tap of the machine. Even our children who are outside the education system know more about things than many of us do. So therefore, as teachers, our role has now changed. We now need to look at more inquiry-based teaching, allow children to ask questions in class, to move towards interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary connection in whatever subjects that we are dealing with. We need to and we have to now change from the chalk and blackboard kind of teacher. We now need to become facilitators, guides, and mentors. Our main help now is to help children make sense of all the information that's available. How do you know what to believe? What is the kind of right information you look for? How do you analyze that information? How do you do research? How do you come to conclusions? These are the skills that we need to impart to our kids today, because the 21st, in fact, I want to quote here something written by the OECD about the future in education. And they say that the kind of jobs that will be available is not known. The kind of problems that will arise in the 21st century is not known. So we are actually educating our kids for something that is unfathomable in many ways. So what are the qualities? So we have to think, what are the skills that teachers need to prepare children for that kind of a world? So they need skills like critical thinking, problem solving, curiosity, the ability to do research. How do you collaborate? How do you set goals for yourself? How do you have the courage to take steps and not be put off by failures? Communication skills are going to be very important. And these are multidisciplinary. It's not that it's going to be only in physics or maths or English or history. These are the qualities that they really need. They must learn to observe. They must learn to evaluate. They must learn to analyze, form opinions. Otherwise, what do you mean by critical thinking otherwise? And problem solving. And underpinning all this is the holistic approach that children must be empathetic. When you are innovative, when you want to innovate something, you need to innovate something that will benefit people, that will benefit your community, that will look at problems like water, the shortage of water, of climate change. So these are the kind of issues they need to apply themselves to. And these are values that can only be by parents. And in fact, the future lies in the hands of teachers, because we are at a very critical juncture in human history. And everything depends on the next generation, how they tackle these problems. And their ability to tackle will depend on how the teachers manage the classroom situation. I hope, Manu, that answers your question.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Yes, absolutely wonderfully. I'm sure all teachers
Can't hear you. I'm not able to hear anything.
Ma'am, probably there is some.
Okay.
Sorry, ma'am, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay, ma'am, I was just saying that the new education policy seems to have a perfectly synergized agenda with the new normal. Talking about experiential education, skill development, better integration of technology, emphasis on foundational years, EQ or emotional quotient, and so much more. How optimistic are you about
Yeah.
the execution of these plans, considering the diversity at all levels in India, and what should be the way forward?
Well, the way forward, first, as I've already mentioned earlier, the critical role will be played by teachers. And therefore, the training of teachers to make this shift, it's more than a paradigm shift. As I mentioned earlier, it's a 360-degree shift. So
Right.
we need to equip and give tools to our teachers to be able to implement this in the classroom. One, the state governments need to adopt. Secondly, we need to train our teachers. And the third thing is everything depends on how the classroom transaction happens. Now, the government, one very nice thing about the education policy is, unlike the Right to Education Act, which covered ages 6 to 14, they are covering from age 3 to 18. So therefore, the entire education journey of the child has been mapped out. And 5 years they call found. Many people wonder, oh, why so from 3 and why 5 years? But children learn the most during that period. So it's a very important period to cover. And we have to make a mental shift of having from 10 plus 2 to 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. 5 years for the primary education up to class 2. Then 3 years for the preparatory education. Then 3 years for middle school. And finally, we have the high school. But I must mention to you that all this will succeed if teachers, schools, managements pay enough attention to the middle school, the classes 6, 7, and 8. Unfortunately, we are so focused on 9, 10, 11, 12 that the middle school gets neglected, but most of the consolidation of the learning happens in the middle school. And I think the teachers of primary school and middle school are the ones that I admire the most, because that's where true learning happens. And that's where we have to bring in project-based learning. We have to bring in experiential learning. And that's the only way it will get implemented. You see, unless the teachers buy into the new education policy, this will not go anywhere. So, and I think as teachers, all of us together must realize that it's such a huge responsibility on us. In fact, this is the turning point of the entire century. We have never had a pandemic like this for 100 years. We have never had such a burst and tsunami in technology. The global connectivity we haven't had earlier. At the same time, the planet is facing innumerable problems. And it's all come together. And it is our duty to empower the young to be able to deal with all this. Yeah. Again, I can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Ma'am, this is where, like I'm saying that this is where, again, life skills is so important now when we talk about resilience and, we talk about collaboration, resilience. So these are the life skills that need imparted to children. And like this is what, in fact, the new education talk about. But this, ma'am, the new education policy also talks about inclusive and equitable education. Considering the great digital divide that exists all over the world, how does blended learning become a reality? And what should schools be doing to actually prepare themselves as they reopen after the pandemic?
You see, one thing we have got to remember, when I permeate every life, including teaching. So students or governments will have to do something, bridging the digital into smartphones, which are affordable compared to tablets. But there's no way you're going to escape this. So some kind of blended learning will have to be done. Maybe it can be through video conferencing, that in the district headquarters, you have the best of teachers and they beam to schools in that particular block or district. I mean, again, this is what I'm saying. This is a problem solving thing. And sometimes I think even the kids may come up with the answer. But there's no way we can escape. And if the digital divide does not get attended to, you will have greater inequity in the world. Because all information is there on the digital world. And unless we equip all our children to be able to access that, to be able to use that, unless we equip all our teachers to leverage the technology that we have available, I don't think there's any answer to that. You see, there's no turning back now. The past is gone. The future is going with the artificial intelligence, etc. coming. Now you've got drones. You can use drones even to help with your education. And the smartphones are becoming better and maybe hopefully cheaper. And most homes will be able to have. So you will have to use, there'll be myriad techniques that schools will have to use. It won't be one size fit all. But one thing that will be common and which will be there is the use of technology. Without doing that, I don't think we can progress at all. So there's no point in talking about non-technology days because that's gone and finished. And children and teachers and everybody has to learn to leverage that. Maybe one day people will, from villages, can go to a central point to learn and they'll go by drones. There are many ways in which we can do it. It's not impossible. If people can deliver stuff by drones, one day it can deliver people by drones. In fact, I was once asked to make a little sketch of what schools and things will look like. And the sketch I made was kids, the drone coming and picking up the kids like in a pod and taking them to the school. So maybe the future is something like that. But we all have to be innovative. Now at this, I also help with a school called the Vidya Gyan School, where the children are all from rural areas. We have managed to do their online teaching through smartphones. We help them to acquire. Every family I found has at least one smartphone in the house, which is shared among all. So you have to be innovative and think of ways. So the digital divide has to be bridged. We don't have an option where that is concerned.
Right, ma'am. But when we're talking about this greater integration of technology, it is obvious that it is our teachers who have to carry this whole new system forward. And which brings me to the very pertinent question of teachers training. We all know that teachers training, which should be at the forefront, has not been given its due. Is it time now for a robust teachers training program across schools so that we have teachers with adequate skill sets to seamlessly lead this post-pandemic teaching and learning? And what does the new education policy have for teachers and for training of teachers?
See, the new education policy has been smart in not mandating anything, I think. But they have also mentioned 4-year teacher training that you do 3 years of your subject, whatever it be, and then do another year which will equip you to be a teacher. They're looking at the Finnish model, but Finnish model is 3+2, but here they are looking at 3+1. But it's not so much the 3+1 or the 3+2. What is going to be important is going to be the curriculum that will be part of the B.Ed training program. Currently, it is obsolete and it's antiquated and it's outdated. So it needs to be completely revamped to equip teachers to deal with what I've already spoken about, that they need to move away from only being worried about the content. The new education policy focuses a lot on holistic approach to teaching, that it's not just the skill sets, it's also the values. And the skill sets have changed. Earlier on, your skill set was what? It was really rote learning. That was a skill set we were giving kids. Now the skill set has changed, that you must have curiosity, you have to explore, you have to research, find out. Because only when you find out things will you be able to embark on critical thinking. And if you can critically think, then only can you move to problem solving. Also, we are going to move into an age when we need to collaborate. We need to know what is teamwork. How do we communicate with others? And at the same time, it has to be underpinned by values. And you know, it's easy to bring in the values if you talk about collaboration and teamwork. Because what does that entail? It entails trust, it entails loyalty, it entails integrity. So you see, all the values come in by themselves. The world is in a sad state today. I strongly feel that because we do not give enough emphasis to values. We are only interested, will you get a 99%? Will you get a 98%? Do you know that in the coming years, when people employ, your grades are going to be irrelevant. They will want to know, what have you innovated? What are your thoughts? What are your opinions? And they don't, what are your suggestions? And people who can innovate, who can problem solve, who can think critically, they are the ones who are going to succeed. And therefore, I think teacher training is center stage. The tragedy across the world, I think, is everybody talks about student-centric education. They all talk about resources, but they completely forget that the resources and the curriculum and the students can be connected only by the teachers. So teachers are the critical link. And I think it is time, like Finland and Sweden, who have realized this, that we also realize and empower our teachers. And not only empower, we have to value our teachers as well. And until we start doing that, I don't think we can, everything will be only on paper. We'll have lovely ideas on paper. But unless we train our teachers, and you know, I can tell you one thing, I was talking to teachers in rural areas, in small towns, everybody is keen to learn and do their best. Despite what people say, I feel majority of our teachers have their heart in the right place. But we do not give them the opportunity to be the kind of teachers that they can easily be. If we can do that, I think there will be a complete shift in India. Our children are very bright. It's just a question of tapping that potential. And that comes from the teachers. So whoever is listening to our program, and if they are teachers, you know, one of the important things for being a good teacher is you have to be reflective. You have to, in a way, check yourself. You have to analyze yourself. Are you being true to your profession? Are you being true to your students? Is there anything you need to change? Is there anything you need to improve? That's the only way that we can actually step higher and higher. If we reflect, you need to reflect, because education is never static. Education is life. So how can it be static? It's constantly evolving. It's constantly changing. And we, as you call COVID warriors, we need to be at the forefront. So never ever decide that, okay, whatever I'm doing is good enough. There's always something new to do the next day. And it's very important to allow your children to question. And you know, as teachers, we shouldn't be afraid if we don't know all the answers. After all, we are not gods. So if there is an answer we don't know, It's better to be honest and tell the kids, okay, I don't know, I'll check up and I'll find out and I will let you know. Yeah, Manu? Talking a little more about the national education curriculum, one thing I'm very happy about is they have distinctly written that we have to overhaul the entire curriculum, that it's all outdated, it needs to be overhauled. Second very good thing you mentioned is that the board exam patterns have to change, that the board exams will focus on core essentials and will not require rote learning at all. At the same time, if in case you haven't done very well in your school exams, you have another opportunity of the second exam, which will be conducted by the universities. So we are giving our students more opportunities. And then the thrust is on experiential learning and experiential teaching. Again, you see, it's a teaching learning process. And the experiential means more project, not just project. Everybody thinks experiential is only project work. No, experiential is also allowing the children to ask questions, sending them out to find out things. Rather, what we have to realize is that instead of telling them things, they have to discover. You have to plant in the minds of the kids the joy of discovery. That they go and find out, they go and discover, come and discuss in the class. And so you are there as a guide and a mentor, because there's so much information available now that children are lost. So as a guide and mentor, one of the important things you have to teach them is what is the right kind of information to look at. Because so much of fake news is floating around and it's going to be even worse. And the social media is an integral part of our life. So how do they manage the social media? What are the pitfalls? So what we have to remember is whatever curriculum we have, the curriculum is not our God. It is not our master. The curriculum is our tool. And another change we need to make is, even me as a teacher, when you go into a classroom, it used to be, okay, I have to teach them this and they have to learn this. We have to change our attitude now. It's a question of going into the classroom and saying, what is it that my students want? It's not what I want. What is it they're aspiring for? For example, you are a maths teacher. You are teaching the commerce stream, the science stream, and the humanities stream. But you have to change your approach. The science kids all want to become engineers, astronauts, etc. The commerce kids wants to become something else. The humanities child wants to go into international relations. So looking at their aspirations, you help them and give them the knowledge that helps them to fulfill their aspirations. So don't go into classroom anymore deciding what you think they should know. It's a question of what they are aspiring for. I know it sounds very terrible kind of a thing, but that's what we need to do. Yeah, Manu?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. And I will just come to the question of the medium of instruction, being imparted in the mother tongue. When the new educational policy was announced, there was a lot of confusion in the minds of parents and educators about regional languages being the medium of instruction. And there are parents who still seek clarity on this. In fact, I just have a question on this from one of our participants, that when children move from one state to another, how will they manage if they have been educated in a regional language?
Yeah. See, the NEP has been quite vague where this is concerned, and they have not mandated. So they've allowed it that schools choose what kind of language system they want to follow. In a country like India, where there are different languages in different regions, schools will have to adopt something that can be used across the country. So English will have to be there. But I do agree, when a child is 3 or 4 years old, they learn best in the mother tongue. So I think what we need to do is in the foundation years, when they go from 3 to 5, we need to have dual, I mean, you'll have to use both the languages with them, but you'll have to use the mother tongue at least for a year or so. You know, it has to be blended with the other language. But I really don't think this entire 3-language formula in the NEP has been properly thought out. And I think they've left it to states and schools to make their own choices. And we should be grateful for that.
Right, ma'am. Talking of the foundational years, one feature that stands out in the new education policy is the stress on ECCE, the foundational years. It was long awaited. So with the 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 model, are we now at par with the global education systems?
Well, the proof of a pudding is in the eating. So it's all depends on how we implement. If we move into inquiry-based, multidisciplinary curriculum, yes, we will be on par. But if we don't move into that, we don't. It has to be inquiry-based. It has to be multidisciplinary. You know, for example, if you are going to look at even climate change, it's not just a question for geography, though. It's equally a question for biology. It's a question for physics. It's a question for history. So we have to become multidisciplinary. You can no longer teach in verticals. So if we can achieve that, and if children are allowed to ask questions, discover, explore, critically think, solve problems, yes, certainly we will be on par with Western education. But as I said, we have a long way to go. We have to training of teachers, upgrading our resources, all that has to be done.
Another major concern has been the assessment of learning outcomes in the times of online learning. In fact, a survey, in schools in Karnataka tells us that 95% of teachers feel that there is zero assessment of learning outcomes in the past 6 months of online classes. And they feel that 2020 must be declared a 0 year, as they will have to reinforce the same lessons once the students come back to class. So
you see, this year, this 2020 is a very unusual year. And it depends on different schools, how it goes. And I think the CBSE will have to make adjustments. Some schools may have to repeat everything, some will not have to repeat. I don't think we can have a standardization where this is concerned, but it is very disruptive because it was not planned, nobody anticipated, it just landed on us like a tsunami. So people have coped with it to the best of their abilities, but obviously it's not going to be the kind of perfection that we all wanted. But going forward, that's another thing that NEP has touched, and that is the assessment format. That the assessment in future should be holistic. We are not going to look at only the academic achievements of children, but also the other qualities, other traits. But my concern here is we need smaller number of children in classes. Teachers need to be allowed enough time to do that kind of a holistic assessment. But if we can achieve that, it will be really remarkable. Because, then we are looking at each individual and we'll be able to give them the opportunities that they need. But definitely the NEP has said the assessment mode has to be changed. You see, we are so sold on grades and marks. And we have to learn to move away from that. And parents have to realize that the time is coming when grades and marks are not going to be the only criteria for success in life. May have been in the past, but it's not going to be like that anymore. And personally, as a teacher and as the head of an institution, I have never ever put grades as my primary concern in assessing a student. Every child is born with some talent, and as educationists we need to encourage that talent. I have the example of this young man. The mother came in for admission. Sanskriti was a new school. I was warned by everyone, take only high achievers, otherwise your name of your school will be destroyed, etc., etc. And there comes in this mother, and I said, your child's marks are not good. He said, yeah, I know, he's such a useless kid. I was so upset, I decided I'm going to admit that kid. If a mother can say that about a child, my heart really broke. We found out what was his problem, helped him. He is doing remarkably well today, earning more money than I could ever imagine earning in my entire life. So, you cannot judge children just by marks. And I think as the teaching fraternity, we need to understand that. And the new education policy does bring that concept in.
It's a big relief, ma'am. I think, like this will come as a relief to parents and to teachers, educators, because the way children are burdened with so much of pressure, so much of peer pressure, so much of parental pressure, I think this system really needs to change. And let's hope that we can make, a difference in that system. Now I'll just come to something very sensitive, which is that, schools are often approached by parents of children with disabilities for integration in regular schools. But resources to effectively integrate these children has always been a constraint. The new education policy advocates educators with cross-disability training. How possible is this going to be? And if we actually talk about inclusion, then this integration must lie at the top of the agenda.
Well, I think it should have been the top of our agenda long ago. There has been a mandate, I think maybe even the right to education, that all schools should have facility for taking in children with learning disabilities. But unfortunately, in our country, there are very few schools that are willing to take on the responsibility. We do have special educators being trained nowadays, but schools are not keen to open up. You see, you have to run a parallel system in a way to help these children. And if in the early years we help the learning disabled, by the time they come to the middle school, most of them are able to integrate into the main schooling system. Then we have the open school system also as a help for them. Again, when we talk about open school, what many schools do is, because the open school system is like you meet once a week and, it's a distant learning really. But schools should keep children in school and send them for open school. Because why should a child lose out on a school experience due to a learning disability? And I think this is a major issue in our country. And NEP has, as you said, highlighted it. But I hope some action is taken on it. There are so many, many children in our country who, with a little bit of help, can lead fruitful lives. But they have nowhere to go. So, this is a prayer now.
Right. I will just come back to a topic that, we have talked about it in detail, but, I just left out something which, I want to ask you. Now, school managements have to be ready to invest in training of teachers. So I am a little obsessive about teachers training, ma'am, so I keep coming back to this. So what would be your advice for school managements as far as teachers training is concerned, that, how serious must they be if they're actually going to be successful in the post-pandemic times?
Something, the management should have been investing in teacher training from many, many years ago.
Absolutely.
It's something that even more necessary now. But the problem now, because I'm talking about the current 2020 situation, many schools have not received enough fees. And there are many private schools are being forced to close down also. So I think from 2021, when hopefully things become normal, we'll have to take a look at all this. And I think the CBSE and the NCRT, and there's a new organization being set up for teacher training, they will have to step in and help. If they would conduct these teacher trainings, then management would be able to send them there. So I think it's not only the school management, I think the government agencies also need to step in, whether it is the CBSE, whether it's NCRT or the new organization that's been set up. They will have to conduct countrywide interesting, engaging teacher training programs. The trouble also is when as a teacher, when I used to go for many of these training programs, they're so boring sometimes. So you have to make it engaging. Right in the beginning, the teachers need to buy into the new plan. And unless you make your training, the trainings also need to be experiential. Allow the teachers to ask questions. Allow them to come up with, maybe they come up with better solutions than many of us can think of. So give the teachers a voice during the training, and I think that will make a remarkable change. And I hope management understand the importance of this. I have one complaint against the NEP. They have not given any freedom to private schools. You know, if they make private schools completely like a charitable trust and you cannot use your money for further improvement, you know, how do the schools manage? That's the only thing that I found a downturn in the NEP.
Exactly. Yes, ma'am. Are schools ready for the post-lockdown world? And can parents send their children back to school with confidence? I think this is what every parent wants to know.
Listen, someday or the other, children have to go back to school. I can understand as a parent the fear you have in your heart, but there's no option. And remember one thing, this is something I feel every teacher across the world has to think about. Children are going to be there, every child is going to be affected in some way or the other by this lockdown. Because it is unnatural for children to study in solitude. Children thrive when they are in peer company, when they socialize, especially the younger ones, more than the older ones even. So they're all going to be traumatized when they come back. Some will verbalize, some will not verbalize. So we will have to be extremely sensitive in how we deal with them. Because they're going to come back with many, many issues. And parents will have to take the risk and send them back. Hopefully we have a vaccine by then. And I don't know when the schools will reopen, maybe by December. But at some stage we'll have to take the risk. And it will be the individual choice of parents.
Right.
And schools will have, the bigger problem is for schools, by the way, because they'll have to look at social distancing, they'll have to look at masks, how do they manage children. It's not going to be easy at all for schools. In fact, I was watching a video of a school in the US. They have put an entire plexiglass in front of a desk. So the child sits surrounded by this glass, wearing a mask. So I don't know, coming back to school is a bigger issue for schools. And the schools will have to take, they can't take break time at the same time for the whole school. Different classes will be allowed out at different times. And you know, children socialize. How much are you going to make them socially distant from each other? It's going to be a very tough choice to make.
A few days back, the Prime Minister of India, while talking about the new education policy, talked about the need for learning to read. Connotations extremely pertinent. And ma'am, we all know that you know, we are all the products of everything that we read and we continue to read. How of this digital age be inspired to read?
Well, you have to look at different techniques. Well, you can use a Kindle, they can read on their iPad, they can read on their laptop. But the reading habit has to come, again, it's going to be a very tough job from the foundation years. If teachers do storytelling and read to them, if there is a reading activity in the school, that will encourage children. But you know, again, I think what happens to our children in rural areas, we have to think of nice books and stories relevant to their lives. So if you introduce reading in children right when they are in the foundation years, the chances of their continuing to read are much more. It can't be introduced later on in life when they develop other interests. And don't only look at the paper book. You have to allow them to use technology to read. hopefully it happens. I love reading, and I hope the kids also love reading.
Ma'am, this brings me to the involvement of parents. You know, we saw that in a forced situation like the pandemic, parents rose valiantly to the occasion. And, you know, there was such great help, you know, in terms of empowering children, like while the online classes were going on. So, the role of parents in terms of education of their children as we take this new normal of you know, like in the system of education.
See, parents have always played an important role in a child's life. At school, we feel very happy we are doing this and we are doing that, but the child spends maximum time with their parents. So the values that the kids get are basically from home, and parents can help tremendously by helping the children realize that failure is not dead. One of the things that kids don't really face, especially in India, is failure. That's why we have such a high suicide rate among high schoolers and undergraduates. So it's something that the parents can teach them, that failures are stepping stones to success. I used to tell my students that if people tell you I have never failed in my life, I said, I can bet you they're telling you lies. Because everybody fails at something or the other in life. And we learn from that and you go on. And I think in the 21st century, one of the skills children definitely need is the ability to cope with failure. And this kind of resilience that we were talking about will come not just from the school, it will also come from the parents. And I know that during this pandemic, they have had a tough time, because you had parents where both parents are working, but they have had to make time. But I've also had, on a lighter note, I've had parents ring up and ask me, how do we deal with our teenage children? We are unused to having them all the time. So that's how it goes. Life is like that.
Okay, ma'am, I think now we will just go, like we have quite a bit of questions from the participants. So we will go
Okay.
to the first question is, like one of the participants has asked that what was wrong with the education policy of 2005 and what is going to be new in the education policy of 2020?
What is going to be new is a greater emphasis on inquiry-based learning, changing the type of exam that children will give in class 12. We only talked about school education, but NEP also deals with higher education. And another very important thing which I haven't mentioned so far is that they are allowing the selection of cross-disciplinary subjects. For example, if you are doing a class 12 and you want to do history, geography, biology and chemistry, you can do it now. So they're giving that option of choosing your choice of subjects. That's a very important thing. The holistic approach, if it can really be translated into reality, is something wonderful. They say they have recommended the change of curriculum, focusing on what they call core competencies, core issues, and which means if you are looking at moving away from rote learning. So, also an approach about a more global approach to everything. So I think they have turned it around considerably compared to what it was earlier. But again, I mentioned everything hinges on how it is implemented. So far, these are all words on a paper. So let us see what happens.
Right. We have another question. Do you think online teaching can be effective in imparting emotional support to a child who might be in need for it?
No, online teaching temporarily is okay. I'm not in favor of totally moving to online teaching. I think blended learning is a better phase, or maybe flipped classroom. One of these are the better ways to go, because as I mentioned earlier, children need socializing. So therefore, if you want to attend to their emotional needs, I think personal meeting makes a huge difference. Online, however much you try to help them, it does have an element of impersonality about it. So even if you see, even if you do not meet them every day, if you meet a child with emotional needs once a week and then support online for 2 more days, 2 other days in the week, it's fine. But that one personal meeting is very important because it makes a connection. Teaching, I'm sure all teachers realize that teaching is about developing relationships. It's about your relationship with your students, whomever it may be. So therefore, completely online, personally, I don't think solves the problem.
Right. How is online teaching going to be possible in rural India? Like, this is a concern expressed by one of our parents, by one of our participants.
See, online teaching, not just in rural India, anywhere, I don't think is something that is that I would recommend fully. We are going through a bad patch now because of the pandemic, but hopefully it will end at some stage. And even in rural India, children will be able to go to schools. Then it is up to our governments to ensure that the schools are what the NEP is laid out for us, that they have good infrastructure. They don't need fancy buildings, but they need decent classrooms, decent furniture. They need to be technology enabled. Nowadays in India, the optic fiber has been laid to most of our villages. I think the country will get covered in the next few years. So government must make their rural schools technology enabled as well, and do extensive teacher training. And online education will not work completely for not just rural kids, for any kids.
Another question we have is that why is the HRD ministry now renamed as the Ministry of Education?
Something, it was the Ministry of Education in the past. We have gone back in reverse. Yeah, in a way, it's good because that means that the government is focusing on education. Because if India has to, we keep talking about, 21st century, India's century. It will not be India's century unless we do something about our education. Maybe the government has realized that. And I hope and I really pray that by calling it the Ministry of Education, they spend more of the GDP on education.
On education, absolutely.
We are one of the countries we spend the lowest on GDP on education. So I'm very happy that it's called Ministry of Education now.
Another question we have is, what are the pedagogy methods that we can follow in online classes?
See, this depends on individual teachers and whatever strategies work for you. It depends on what your children respond to. I would also say I very strongly am against too much of screen time. And I also feel suppose you give 20% screen time, the rest of the work can be offline. So try and remember also that the attention span of children of any age ranges from 5 minutes to 15 minutes. More than that, the attention span doesn't range. So I would advise that the pedagogy that one has to follow is whatever it is you say in those 15-20 minutes, and give them more offline work, because it's very bad for them to be looking at the screen all the time. And remember, if it's 1 week or 2 weeks, it is okay. But 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, it can do permanent harm. Not just to the eyes, it can psychologically also do a lot of harm to them. So I would follow that. I would give more work offline and less time on the screen. And other strategies is what you have used in the classroom and what has worked for your kids. Because each of us as a teacher, we have our own style of teaching. So I know how my class would respond. So even if I go online, I know their quirks. So you have to adapt to that.
We have another question. The new education policy doesn't talk much about parents training and awareness program. We just talked a bit about it. So what can we do about it? Why have parents, who are such important stakeholders in the education process, why have they been ignored in the new education policy?
I think they were looking only at the teachers and the students, and I guess they didn't go to the parents.
Yeah.
But I think having training for parents is something that individual schools need to do. Depending on what are their expectations. So I think if schools, whenever we reopen after this pandemic, I think it's a very good idea for principals to have PTMs where they explain the entire new approach to the parents. And maybe here you can do if some NGOs want to take up, they can do online training for parents. Parents can do online training, unlike the kids.
From a child's point of view, are Olympiads a burden? Or is it okay to, like for children to go on giving these
I don't know.
Olympiads?
To be very honest, I would like teachers to give me the answer to this. Are Olympiads really, are they really that important?
Essential.
Because again, I found children going to coaching classes and rote learning. I mean, I think it kind of defeats the purpose then. Of course, it's kind of a competitive, but it's become crazy. You have Olympiad for class 2, class 3, class 4. I personally really don't think it's that essential. And we're moving away from such things now. We are moving away from that. When you're talking about inquiry based, you're looking at problem solving, critical thinking. Competition should be which involve critical thinking and problem solving. Do the Olympiads match up to that? I really don't know. So for this, I would ask the teachers to give their, they are the best people to answer this question.
The new education policy also talks about alignment of vocational training as a part of the curriculum. How can it be merged in the regular teaching learning process?
I think I think this is a great idea, and it's a kind of a revolutionary shift really, that we introduce these vocational skills from much younger classes. Now what we are doing is they finish 10th and then it's like, acha, you are not very good at studies, so you go. So it's got a stigma attached to it. But if we have vocational studies from a younger class, there won't be an issue. I visited a school in New York actually, which was completely skill-based, vocation-based, with carpentry and all kinds of things. And it's one of the top schools in New York, actually. So I think we need to bring in these vocational skills from a much younger class, maybe from the middle school. So there's no stigma attached to it. It's like art, music, dance. Don't you start that from an earlier class? So you can, only thing is that all this needs a lot of infrastructure and resources. So where is the government going to spend more money on this? How will we get all these resources and infrastructure? That is the question over here. I think it's a very good idea, but the government will have to spend much more money in that case.
We have another question. When is this NAP going to start? Like, I think what she means to ask is that, when is it, when NAP going to be applicable?
From what I read in the newspapers, they said 2021. But I don't know whether it will be, and the other thought is 2023. I think the government is saying 2023.
Children are finding difficulties in coping in online classes. So what is the remedies? I think you have spoken at length about this now.
I think I would suggest to teachers, don't get worried or hassled about it. Let the children do what they're capable and are able to do. When they come back to school, you can see what is done. And also remember, in 2020, the curriculum will have to be truncated. We can't expect them to have done everything that was required, especially up to class 8. So I think I would tell teachers, don't get stressed. Let the children learn whatever they can at their pace. They're already suffering so much trauma. Let's add to it.
Can homeschooling or choice can be given to children to not compulsorily attend schools regularly? It's a method followed in the American education system.
Yeah, well, homeschooling is a whole different thing, and parents who want to opt for it will have to study it very carefully. Because homeschooling has advantages, it also has disadvantages. First and foremost, will they be able to impose the discipline to cover whatever is required at home, especially if both parents are working? How will they work out the schedule at home? How will they compensate for the socializing? Will they organize something more when they are with friends? So all these have to be looked at. Because remember, you can homeschool during school, but they have to go back to the university and into society when they go for higher education. So how will they be ready for that? So homeschooling is a completely different ball game. People will need to read it thoroughly and make a choice. Not so simple.
How will a child be able to make choices in class 9 itself? There is no clarity how the process will begin, and schools may not follow it with all choices as well.
See, that's the issue again. I think the bigger issue is that schools will give all the choices. Because I'll tell you, the problem with giving all the choices is again cost. Like suppose only one child in your class, in your school, wants to study guitar in the science stream. Now, will you appoint a teacher only for that one student? So what the NEP has suggested is clusters. That in an area, if there are 10 schools, then you have one guitar teacher and all the kids go. So kind of a cluster formation and they all work together. It is a bit vague, but they have suggested the cluster formation. And it is going to be, that's why I've said the government, if the NEP is to be implemented, the government has to spend much more of money. Because it'll have to go to all the government schools. So all the resources will have to be increased. The outlay will go. So if they don't spend, these will just remain words on a paper.
Well, we have another question which again talks about the same thing, that many children are not taking any interest in the online classes. They're taking it very lightly. So ma'am, what do we do about it? I'm sure it's a very concerned and desperate parent.
Yeah, but is it a question from a parent or a teacher?
I think it's a teacher who's also a parent, obviously.
See, there's very little that you can do. Obviously, it's not being engaging enough. Why? Children get engaged with online classes if you give them things to do. Do a survey, do a quiz, do some crazy things in between. But if it's going to be all the time just lecturing them, ye padho, wo padho, I'm telling you that attention span, the oldest child will give you about 15 minutes. The youngest child will give you only 3 to 5 minutes. So beyond that, if it goes, they will lose interest. So ask this parent teacher that maybe the child suggests to the school to give more activities. And I found in one school they were very innovative. They gave them some sums to do. They said, now you get up and run down the whole house and see how quickly you came back. So the child came back. Oh, I got back in 3 minutes. And then the next thing was done. So you have to do things like that with children. You have to engage them. Also, I will tell her not to get too worried. These online classes, pandemic will one day end. They'll all go back to the classroom. And hopefully they'll learn in a better way and a more fun way. Not to worry too much.
What will be the futuristic approach of education in schools after pandemic with new education system, with e-learning? Will it overburden teachers as well as students?
The whole idea of NEP is not to overburden anybody. Now, the problem, I think teachers are getting overburdened because we have all been thrust into technology headlong without any chance of getting ready. That's the stress we are having. Because we're not used to technology, we're not used to online teaching. Nobody has told us how to do it. And we have suddenly been pitchforked. It is stressful for teachers. But teachers will have to get trained in technology, because I think blended learning or flipped classrooms will become the norm someday or the other. But for students, hopefully, I don't know, one of the things I read in the NEP is that they are going to be 10 days in the year when the children will carry no bags and books to school. So they definitely want to reduce the burden on the children. And I only hope, my only fear now is that when the children go back after the pandemic, schools will want to fill their heads with all the knowledge they think that they have missed. They should not do that. You know, 10th and 12th are board exams, and I'm sure CBSE has already reduced the curriculum. Up to class 8, it's all in your hands. Look at the core competencies. Don't force children, say, itna thara syllabus you haven't learned, we have to push it all into your head. You have to remember, children are not vessels into which you're going to stuff content. Children are vessels which have their own content, and we ignite the fire under them. That's what we need to do. So I sincerely hope when children go back after the pandemic, schools don't go on an overdrive to catch up with everything. There's no need for it, actually.
Ma'am, I would just like to give you some of the feedback that is coming in on this discussion. We have teachers, we have parents who are saying that this is the best discussion on the new educational policy that they have attended so far. So, ma'am,
thank you, very, very kind of everybody. And I must say hello to my Revati Venkatesh and Sonali, Samya and Sanjukta.
I think
thank you for joining.
It is because
thank you very much.
It's the heart of a teacher speaking. So I think, you know, that is what makes things very simple to understand. And I mean, for a long time, there have been questions in the minds of teachers, of parents. And I think the way you have addressed it today has brought so much clarity and a lot of relief, I'm sure, to everybody's mind.
But, you know, I honestly feel that the key to transformation in our society are the teachers. And
Absolutely.
as I said earlier, 90% of teachers are wanting to do their best. We just don't give them the wherewithal to do their best. I hope the government, by calling it the Ministry of Education, is going to bring about that change for us.
We all hope so, ma'am.
And good luck and congratulations to all the teachers. You are in one of the greatest professions in the world. Where else will it happen that you are walking down somewhere and someone comes running up to you and says, ma'am, I was in your class. In no other profession do you get a response like that. So I think we are very blessed to be teachers, and let's make the most of the opportunities God has given us. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. On behalf of the Wisdom Tree Global School, I would like to express deep gratitude to Padma Shri Gowri Ishwaran for bringing together all of us today at a time when each one is seeking clarity on the way forward. We live with hope, and we will definitely move out of this difficult phase sooner than later. However, like I said earlier, these 6 months have given us the opportunity to reassess and recalibrate our strengths and weaknesses and work towards strategizing to comply with the needs of the time. Thank you to all the wonderful participants who have joined us today. Your questions have given us some very wonderful insights, and I hope we have the opportunity for such interactions again in the future. Thank you very much, Gowri ma'am. Our deep respect to you, and thank you to everyone for having joined us today. This has been a wonderful, enriching session, and I'm sure we will be announcing another session very soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed talking to you all.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.